The movie begins with a beautiful view over a hill where the forest landscape contrasts the night sky. Hoping to hide from potential peeping Toms, high school students Mary Jo and Andy are intimate in his car. Although Mary Jo tries to force Andy to do more, he refuses, telling her he wants to concentrate on the upcoming game. Unwilling to listen to him, Mary Jo pushes things further, and although it seems like Andy is enjoying it, Andy's eyes suddenly glow red, and he snaps Mary Jo's neck. A few seconds later, the police arrive to check who was in the car. Heading out of the vehicle, the sheriff begins to speak to Andy while the deputy checks inside the car. When the officer sees the dead body, he is surprised, but before he can do anything, Andy pulls the gun off the sheriff's holster and shoots the deputy. After that, the sheriff instructs Andy to leave the area while he reports what happened. Meanwhile, a teenage boy watches everything develop and quickly runs away before the others see him. The scene changes, and we are taken to a ferry crossing a lake, holding several dozen passengers and their vehicles. Leaning on the fence, sibling Steve and his younger sister Lindsay enjoy the view of the beautiful landscape all around the lake. Lindsay is excited about their new life in a new town and expresses her enthusiasm to Steven. Unable to share her excitement, Steven only listens to his sister, entertaining her with questions. Seeing that her brother wasn't happy about the move, Lindsay assures him that their new life will be much better. Lindsay walks away and asks him to join them, but Steven notices a small empty boat floating away with an abandoned bag still inside before he can leave. As soon as the ferry drops them on the other side, Steven's family is greeted by a security officer at the edge of the town who welcomes them inside, telling them they will love it there and that they would never want to leave. "Easy there, officer. They just moved here." When they finally arrive at their new house, the moving company employees assist them in setting up all their stuff inside. That night, Lindsay sits on the kitchen table playing with her alien toy when her mother asks for help putting away the groceries. In his room, Steven is sitting on the bed, lost in his thoughts when his father Nathan passes by and asks him if he's okay. Nathan receives only a reserved smile and a nod. Nathan leaves his son to finish unpacking. That night, Steve wakes up gasping for breath, soaked in cold sweat, after having a dream about his older brother who had taken his own life. Steve attends the first day of school the following day and is surprised when he witnesses a fight between two other students. Separating the fight, the teacher sends the student who had started the fight, a troublemaker by the name of Dickie, to the principal's office. After class, Steve heads to the dining hall to have lunch, where he is joined by two of his classmates, Gavin and Uve. After introducing themselves, Gavin openly expresses that they were under the influence of some weed, showing that he isn't embarrassed to hit on the prettiest girl in school, Lorena. Realizing Gavin's interest in Lorena, Steve asks the young man if he had ever asked her out. Smiling sarcastically, Gavin explains that their school has a caste system where each student has their social standing and begins to describe the groups to Steve. After going through the groups one by one, Gavin points to Lorena's group, the Blue Ribbons, and explains that she hangs out with the perfectionists, the most popular kids in school. After school, Steve heads out of the building and looks around the place, his first day experience telling him that something is very wrong with it. That night, Lindsay invites a friend she met at school to have dinner with her family. As they gather around the dining table, Lindsay brings up her brother Alan, who has passed away, but Nathan urges them to change the subject. Upset about the situation, Steve heads to his room. In a different part of town, Dickie drives his car to the docks, where he lives in one of the parked boats. When he arrives, he is shocked to see a group of popular kids surrounding the place. Startled, he tries to fight his way out of there, but is overwhelmed by their numbers. The following day, Steve is called to the principal's office to be officially welcomed to the school, and the two are joined by the school counselor, Dr. Edgar. Steve is asked if he is thinking of joining any school activities, and Edgar suggests the Blue Ribbon Group. Telling them he would think about it, Steve heads out of the meeting and sees the beautiful Rachel sitting in the back of a truck. Good choice, Steve. Seeing him stare at Rachel, Gavin appears beside Steve and offers to introduce him. The three of them go to a nearby store to try and get someone to buy them beer, but Gavin needs help convincing people. Suddenly, Rachel is approached by Chug, a Blue Ribbon member who is attracted to her. After being made fun of by Gavin, Chug enters the shop and stands in the queue at the cash register to pay for his item. When he catches sight of Rachel in her attractive outfit, he goes completely crazy and starts beating up a random person while the town sheriff simply watches. I'm not sure the sheriff is doing his job properly. Seeing the commotion, Steve and the others run to the store to watch Chug beat one of the kids to death while Rachel explains to Steve that Chug is a steroid abuser. After leaving the area, Gavin explains his theory that the blue ribbons are under some sort of sinister force that puts them into an unprecedented rage. Still, Rachel thinks that this is a silly theory. The following day, Gavin and the group are shocked to see that Dickie has joined the blue ribbons and is smashing up his old car in front of the entire school. Although Gavin is more convinced than ever about the conspiracy, Steve remains skeptical, unwilling to believe Gavin about the murders. That afternoon, Steve goes to the local diner and is approached by Trent, one of the Blue Ribbon members. Trent takes him to one of the booths full of his friends and introduces him, urging him to join their club. While they're speaking to him, Gavin approaches Steve, who asks to speak to him. Annoyed by the intrusion, the Blue Ribbons act aggressively towards Gavin, making Steve leave. Once they walk outside, Gavin explains that 3 of the people inside who were part of the Blue Ribbon team used to be his friends, and tells Steve that he is sure that they are being brainwashed. Telling him that he can provide proof, Gavin takes Steve to the school, and the two sneak into the vents so they can spy on a private Blue Ribbon meeting. If you think Gavin is not crazy, subscribe to the channel. During the meeting, a concerned parent raises her hand and explains that although she is pleased by her son's transition, she also noticed that he has become unkind to everyone outside of the Blue Ribbon group. Brushing off the concern, Edgar, who was leading the meeting, explained to her that the club members are now experiencing pride for the first time, which might make them seem a little snobby. Edgar then announced that a new candidate had been selected whose parents were concerned that he was wasting his potential. After the group votes to accept the new candidate, the door opens, and Gavin is shocked to see his parents walk in. Panicking, Gavin rushes out, telling Steve that they will come for him next. When Gavin reveals a gun, threatening to shoot anyone who attempts to come for him, Steve tackles him, snatching the weapon from his hand and telling him to go home. Although Gavin calls out for him, Steve refuses to turn back and heads home. The following day, Rachel, Steve, and the rest of the group are sitting in the dining hall when they catch the shocking sight of Gavin entering the hall, dressed like the Blue Ribbons, and heading over to their table. Unable to believe their eyes, Rachel walks over to speak to him, but he refuses to respond. When Steve tries to approach Gavin, the other Blue Ribbon members stop him, beating him in a group. Heading over to Steve, Gavin seems like he is trying to give him a helping hand, but kicks him in the stomach instead, whispering that he too soon will see. Upset by the incident, Steve barges out of the dining hall. The following day, Steve goes to the school boiler room where he and Gavin had used to hang out and befriends the janitor, who suggests he knows more than he left on. That night, when Steve arrives at his house, he is shocked to see Lorena sitting in his living room. When he asks what she is doing there, she explains that she's tutoring his younger sister. Lorena attempts to seduce him, but she suddenly snaps, her action sending her into a frenzy, and she breaks the mirror on the wall with her face. She then attempts to stab him with a shard, but he manages to stop her, snapping her back to herself. Quickly getting up, Lorena tells Steve that she has a physics test tomorrow, and she rushes out of the house. Now, that was an awkward first date, right, Steve? The scene changes, and we see Lorena lying on a medical bed, and it is revealed that Gavin has been right all along. Dr. Edgar had been brainwashing the teenagers by implanting them with microchips. However, Dr. Edgar could not control the teenagers' hormones, making them go into rage attacks. The following day, Rachel feels overwhelmed by recent events and goes into the boiler room for a smoke, finding a CD left by Gavin. Rachel is unaware that Chug followed her, and when he asks her out, she refuses. Chug snaps, yelling at her in an angry frenzy. When he starts to attack her, a sudden anti-rat device turns on, its frequency affecting Chug's implanted chip and making him go crazy. While Chug finds and destroys the device, Rachel uses the opportunity to escape quickly. The janitor witnesses the entire incident. After being continuously harassed by the Blue Ribbons group, Steve heads over to Rachel's house to speak with her about what is happening at their school. Letting him inside her house, Rachel shows Steve the CD Gavin left for her. The CD contains a recording of him talking about how he had overheard Edgar talking about a strange experiment. Once the video ends, Rachel hands Steve all the research she had done on Edgar, and the two assume that the man was dabbling in mind control. Deciding to head over to the mental institute where Edgar works to learn more about the man, the two take the ferry across the lake, where Steve shares his story about his dead brother. Sneaking into the mental facility, they find out that Dr. Edgar's daughter was a patient there and realize she was his first victim. On their way home, Steve and Rachel are stopped by the town sheriff, who tries to arrest them, but the school janitor saves them. When they arrive at his house, Steve tells Rachel to wait for him while he gets his sister, unaware that his parents have already signed him up for the Blue Ribbon program. Don't you hate it when your parents make decisions without you knowing about them? Refusing to be brainwashed, Steve attempts to escape, but he is ambushed by the Blue Ribbon members who are waiting for him outside. Steve is dragged into the mental facility where he is strapped to a chair while Edgar begins the transformation process. Before they can implant him with the chip, Steve uses the scalpel he had picked up on his way in to escape, grabbing Rachel from the other room. When they escape the facility, they find Uwe and Lindsay waiting for them outside, and the group rushes to the ferry to escape. While rushing down the road, they see the entire street, led by Dr. Edgar, closed off by the Blue Ribbons. While Steve and the others think of ways to escape, the school janitor arrives, his car full of anti-rat devices, and leads the zombie teenagers away from Steve and the others. Telling Lindsay and his friends to wait for him by the ferry, Steve follows the janitor, who has been shot by Edgar while driving toward them. Telling Steve that there was no chance of saving the brainwashed kids, he lets them climb all over his car as they attack the anti-rat devices in a frenzy and drive the car down a cliff. Thank you for your service, Mr. Janitor. Seeing that Edgar is the only survivor, Steve tells the doctor that it is all over, but Edgar refuses, telling Steve that there are other towns he could continue his research in. The two begin to fight, but Steve pushes the evil doctor off the edge. Steve then rushes to the ferry, where he sees Rachel and the others waiting for him. After telling Rachel everything that happened, the two kiss and start their lives elsewhere, somewhere where the sheriff is actually doing his job. The scene changes, and we are taken to a different school where a class of troublemaker youths are told they are receiving a new teacher. When the teacher's face is revealed, it's Gavin. And with that, the movie ends. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to subscribe and support the channel. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.